War isn't just about bombs and bullets, it's about intelligence. Armies can't operate blind. They need precise, up-to-date information to plan their next moves, to stay one step ahead of their opponents, and to avoid being caught off guard. Conflicts can be won or lost based on how well each side gathers and uses data, and that's something that Ukraine understands exceptionally well. It's the reason why Kyiv's forces have targeted Russia's intelligence-gathering assets, including not only its ground-based radar stations, but its airborne early warning and control aircraft as well. One strike at a time, Ukraine is shredding Russia's eyes in the skies, and there's nothing that the Russian President Vladimir Putin can do to stop it. Instead, he's forced to watch as his airborne early warning and control AEW&C fleet is systematically erased. The impact of this cannot be understated, as AEW&C systems are exceptionally important in modern warfare. They effectively function as flying radar stations, offering 360-degree, long-range detection of enemy threats in the air, at sea, and on the ground. Many can spot targets from literally hundreds of miles away, issuing alerts to ground teams and giving them ample time to prepare for incoming attacks by taking evasive actions or readying their defenses. These aircraft also serve as aerial command centers, gathering and sharing the real-time information required to coordinate friendly fighters, execute precision missile strikes and bombing runs, and manage complex battle spaces. In short, they're incredibly valuable, providing the real-time data and big-picture battlefield awareness any modern military needs to succeed. And Russia has relied heavily on one specific plane to meet its AEW&C needs, the Beriev A-50. Developed as the successor to the Tupolev Tu-126, which entered service with the Soviet Armed Forces in the 1960s, the A-50 had its maiden flight in 1978 and entered service several years later in 1985. Its design was based around the Ilyushin Tu-76 transport plane and boasts some impressive technical specifications, including a ceiling of 40,000 feet, an operational range of over 4,000 miles, and a flight endurance of approximately 6 hours total, though this can be extended through mid-air refueling. The most distinctive feature of the aircraft is the 30-foot wide rotodome that sits on the top of its fuselage, housing a large surveillance radar system. Nicknamed the Mushroom, this radar allows the A-50 to scan its surroundings and detect aerial targets at distances of up to 650 kilometers, 400 miles, and ground targets as far away as 300 kilometers or 190 miles. The A-50 also has the ability to transmit guidance data to up to a dozen friendly jets all at once. It can, for example, provide the pinpoint location data on Ukrainian assets to nearby strike aircraft, allowing them to attack those assets without even needing to rely on their own internal radar systems. During the latter days of the Soviet Union, up to 5 of these planes were made per year, with more than 40 being made in total by the time the Union dissolved. Since then, production has ceased, though the Kremlin has spoken about making more A-50s in the future and has modernized its remaining aircraft over the years, equipping them with new computers and avionics systems to keep them in line with modern standards. Thus, despite being several decades old, the A-50 remains a relatively competent and capable AEW&C aircraft, and it's proven its worth to the Kremlin's forces on numerous occasions. It flew over Chechnya during both Chechen wars, for example, and enhanced Russia's effectiveness during the short-lived Russo-Georgian War and the Syrian Civil War. It came as no surprise, therefore, that Russia once more relied on the A-50 during its invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin's commanders hoped that these tried-and-true airborne radar planes would help them counteract Ukrainian jets and surface-to-air missiles, while also delivering vital targeting data for the country's kinetic strike campaigns. For a while, everything went as planned. But Ukraine wasn't going to simply sit idly by and allow Russia's eyes in the skies to peek and pry on its operations. Kyiv's commanders understood full well the important role those early warning aircraft played, and as soon as they had the means to do so, they began plotting to take them out, specifically focusing on the modernized A-50U models. Russia reportedly began the war with 8 of these planes in total. One was put out of action just a year into the war on February 26, 2023. At the time, it was reported that a partisan group, the Association of Security Forces of Belarus, had carried out a drone attack and damaged an A-50 aircraft at an airbase near Minsk. The attack was later attributed to the Ukrainian Security Service (SSU), and the damaged aircraft reportedly never returned to operational service. Less than a year later, in January 2024, a second A-50 was struck while on duty. The plane was flying over the Sea of Azov when it suddenly vanished from radar screens. Soon after, reports emerged of a Russian Su-30 aircraft sharing news of an unidentified aircraft catching fire and crash landing. It later turned out that this was the end result of a carefully planned and perfectly executed Ukrainian attack, which actually began several weeks beforehand. According to analysts, Ukraine's Air Force purposely targeted and disabled Russian radar stations across Crimea. In response, the Russians had to relocate an A-50 to the area, which brought it within the range of a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile battery. The battery then fired on the A-50, sending it to its watery grave. In short, Kyiv's forces had cleverly laid a trap that the Russian plane flew right into, and they weren't done there. Only a month later, on February 23, Ukrainian sources reported yet another A-50 elimination. Once more, this reportedly occurred over the Sea of Azov, not far from Russia's Krasnodar Krai region. A long-range Soviet-era S-200 missile system fired at the plane, dealing enough damage to send it spiraling from the skies and killing 10 Russians on board, including several high-ranking officers. Ukraine maintained the pressure in the weeks that followed. In early March 2024, it carried out a drone strike on a known A-50 repair site, the Taganrog aircraft plant. Satellite images of the site showed clear damage to one of the hangars where A-50s and other specialized aircraft are stored. No further details emerged, but it's certainly possible that one or more planes suffered damage during the attack. In June 2025, the already diminished A-50 fleet was dealt another crushing blow during the iconic Operation Spiderweb strike, one of the biggest and most successful Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian soil. At the time, most of the headlines regarding the attack focused on how Ukraine had reportedly eliminated up to a third of the Kremlin's bomber fleet. One smaller but still vitally significant detail went largely unnoticed. Along with the bombers, Ukraine's drones had also successfully struck not one, but two separate A-50s during the operation. Multiple journalists and military experts shared the news, sharing satellite imagery and videos to prove that two of the aircraft had suffered serious damage, specifically to their radar housing rotordomes. The systematic eradication of A-50s continued in November 2025, when Ukraine pulled off another enormous strike targeting several strategic Russian military and industrial sites. This was a massive mission, undertaken by units from the rocket forces and artillery, the Special Operations Forces, Naval Coastal Missile Units, and the Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces. Together, using a mixture of missile drones and Neptune cruise missiles, these forces struck the Taganrog A-50 repair site yet again. Multiple explosions and fires were reported at the site, undoubtedly disrupting any ongoing repairs, maintenance, or modernization efforts on the remaining A-50s in the area at the time. In March 2026, Ukraine followed up with yet another attack against this specific aircraft. On March 17, to be precise, Ukrainian assets struck the 123rd Aircraft Repair Plant in Staria Russa of the Novgorod region. Just like the Taganrog facility, this location is an important piece of military infrastructure where various aircraft are repaired, upgraded, and maintained. Satellite imagery showed that there were at least 9 Il-76 transport planes at the airfield at the time. These are the same planes that formed the basis of the A-50 design. Initial reports noted that there was clear damage to a maintenance hangar, and on March 20, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed in a Telegram post that another A-50 had been hit in the attack. Damage to the A-50 long-range radar detection aircraft has been confirmed. It was on the territory of the Enterprise for maintenance and possibly was awaiting modernization. Now, before we explore the larger impacts of these attacks and what it all means for Russian and Ukrainian prospects moving forward, if this is the kind of insight you want more of, make sure you're subscribed to the Military Show. We break it down like this every week. Accounts vary regarding the exact number of operational A-50s that Russia has left, but even the most generous estimates suggest that there are only a few of these planes left. Indeed, Russia's own very Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies CAST think tank states that there are no more than 4 A-50s available at any given time. That's not a large number, nor is it anywhere near sufficient for Russia to enjoy complete coverage of its own territory or the regions of Ukraine its forces continue to occupy. Every time an A-50 is taken out or even put out of action temporarily, it represents a serious setback for the Kremlin's forces, because even though these planes are relatively old, they're exceptionally important. These planes have provided Russian forces with incalculable amounts of useful intelligence over the course of the conflict so far. They've helped the Kremlin's troops respond promptly to incoming aerial threats, to nullify Ukrainian drones and missiles, and to coordinate their own attacks on Ukraine's assets and infrastructure. And because they're so rare, expensive, with each unit costing around $350 million and no longer being produced, every loss matters so much more. Indeed, in pure military terms, taking out an A-50 isn't just like destroying a typical enemy aircraft. It's more like wiping out a massive command and control ship. In an instant, the enemy loses a vast swathe of radar coverage. Entire regions go dark, the steady stream of intelligence is severed, and countless assets, troop concentrations, and pieces of infrastructure suddenly lose one of the most important sentinels keeping them safe from the skies. The implications are enormous. A-50s see much further than most ground-based radars, for example, since they operate at such high altitudes. Losing even a couple of these planes, therefore, makes it far harder for Russia to scan the skies for signs of incoming aircraft, missiles, or drones. With fewer resources at their disposal, the Kremlin's commanders also have to deal with the difficult question of how best to use the assets they have left. Where one plane gets damaged or destroyed, they may have to reposition another to take its place. However, in doing so, they'll inevitably open up gaps elsewhere for Ukraine to exploit. It's a classic catch-22. Russia suffers no matter what it does. There are no easy answers, no workarounds. It's important to remember, too, that even without Ukraine damaging and destroying these aircraft, they're not exactly brand new. Even those that are left intact still need maintenance from time to time. Crews need to rest, planes need to be refueled, and so on. This may be why Ukraine's forces have focused some of their attacks on the very locations where these planes are often stored while not in use. Not only does this present the opportunity to damage or even destroy any aircraft that might be there at the time, but it also disrupts the core infrastructure that's necessary to keep these planes in the air, to keep them fueled and functional. And the more A-50s Russia loses, the more cautious it's likely to be with those precious few that it still has. We're likely to see the Kremlin's commanders use these planes more sparingly moving forward. That doesn't just have a negative impact on Russia's overall radar coverage and defensive prospects, it also negatively influences its offensive capacities too. Because even though A-50s don't drop bombs or fire missiles themselves, they provide the data that Russian strike fighters rely on to detect and pinpoint target locations. Without the A-50s to assist them, those same fighters may be forced to rely more heavily on their own radars or ground control teams, which can put them at added risk while also making them less effective. None of this means that Russia is completely blind. It still has ground radars, it still has fighter radars, satellites, and other surveillance systems to help it collect information. But it is losing arguably its most important and far-seeing eyes in the sky, and that's a problem that the Kremlin seemingly has no solution for. The country has spoken about recommencing production of A-50 aircraft, but seemingly hasn't been able to find the funds or resources necessary to do so, which is likely linked to its current economic woes. Russia has also boasted about modernization and upgrade programs to its aging A-50 fleet, but its new and improved A-50Us clearly aren't strong enough to withstand Ukrainian drone and missile strikes, as several of them have already been taken out. The Kremlin also tried but failed to create a successor to the A-50, the A-100. It was supposed to gradually replace the A-50, boasting superior radar tracking technology, stronger engines, and a state-of-the-art electronic warfare suite. Unfortunately for Russia, the project has been stuck in limbo for years. A prototype plane made an initial flight back in 2017, but since then, little has been heard of the A-100, except in late November 2025, when Ukrainian forces claimed to have destroyed the prototype. Growing increasingly desperate, Moscow has even floated the idea of creating a brand new hybrid aircraft that would, in theory, combine airborne surveillance, maritime patrol, reconnaissance, and anti-submarine into a single Swiss Army knife-style platform. According to leaked files from Beriev, the same company behind the A-50, This new plane would be based on the B-200 amphibious jet, another Russian plane with a troubled past. However, the files also show that Russia simply doesn't have the necessary components to make these planes, since the engines they need are manufactured in Ukraine and Moscow hasn't been able to come up with a domestic equivalent. So, the A-100 was a failure. The B-200 hybrid plane is going nowhere, and that leaves Russia with just a few Soviet-era A-50s to rely on for its entire AEW&C needs. Ukraine, meanwhile, finds itself in an increasingly powerful position every time it eliminates or damages an A-50. It's not just making its enemy weaker, it's actively opening gaps to exploit. And Kyiv's own aerial capabilities will soon receive an enormous upgrade, making those very gaps even easier to target. Back in October 2025, Kyiv signed an agreement with Sweden for the acquisition of up to 150 Saab JAS-39 Gripen single-engine supersonic multi-role fighter aircraft. Designed to combine strike and reconnaissance capabilities, the Gripen is widely regarded as an excellent 4.5 generation fighter, famed for its cost-effective design, low-maintenance nature, and advanced technologies, including superior electronic warfare capabilities compared to many of its competitors. One ex-NATO military official even called this aircraft one of the best warplanes on Earth, the best fighter that isn't a stealth F-22 and F-35. It could easily take on anything Putin would throw at it. On February 11, 2026, Ukraine announced plans to dedicate part of its new EU support fund to begin the procurement of Gripen fighters, and a couple of months later, on April 17, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky affirmed that Ukraine has already begun training its own pilots on Gripens and will expand further in the fall of 2026. If that assessment is accurate, Ukraine may soon be able to launch some of Europe's finest fighters into its skies at the very same moment that Russia's aerial forces are at their weakest. Equipped with long-range Meteor air-to-air missiles, Gripens could be used to target and destroy Russia's fighters and strike bombers. In the past, the Kremlin was able to rely on the A-50 to track incoming threats and keep those kinds of aircraft safe, feeding them data about enemy assets that were literally hundreds of miles away, giving them a head start whenever they needed to escape. This in turn allowed Russia to move its strike aircraft closer and closer to the front lines, carrying out devastating bombing runs, missile strikes, and other aggressive sorties with its Su-34s, Su-35s, and MiG-31 BMs, for example. But if the A-50s aren't available, those same planes will no longer benefit from those same protections. They may not know that a Ukrainian Gripen is locking onto them or that a Meteor missile is headed their way until it's already too late. This was noted in a recent Defense Express article, which states that one of the Gripen's main objectives would be to push Russian Su-34 strike aircraft, which carry guided bombs, farther away from the front line. This is why the loss of the A-50s matters so much. It's not just blinding the Kremlin's war machine, it's backing it deeper into a dark and dangerous corner from which it may never escape. Now, to learn more about how the momentum of the war is shifting ever more in Ukraine's favor, check out this video, which takes an in-depth look at Kyiv's latest offensive asset, the FP7.X missile. Alternatively, watch this video to learn how a major morale crisis in the Russian ranks is causing tens of thousands of Moscow soldiers to simply abandon their posts and opt for a life behind bars instead of fighting on the front lines. And finally, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to make sure you don't miss more videos just like this one.